I don't know any leader that has the desire to have on their gravestone, like, was productive. So if it's not that desire, then what are we doing it for?
To what degree should our job be so much of our life? To what degree should a company be a company that's making the world a better place?
We've got this opportunity to reframe how we think about work and society and the impact we want to have. But if we're taking the old ideals and using new technology for it, I think we're just gonna ruin it.
Dom Price is a work futurist at Atlassian, a software company based in Sydney, Australia. With experience spanning technology, finance, and gaming, Dom brings a unique perspective to the future of work. As a sought-after media commentator and keynote speaker, he shares his insights on life and the evolving job landscape, helping companies rethink their approach towards success. Since predicting the future of work is at the core of Dom's mission, we shouldn't pass up this opportunity to invite him on our show here, where we talk about the future. Thanks so much for coming on the show, Dom.
Mate, I'm really looking forward to it.
I think we should have a long, rambling, provocative discussion. Shock us with your wildest prediction for the future.
I don't know if it's wild or just hopeful. Maybe it can be both. Maybe there's a Venn diagram where they both exist. But my wild one is we get rid of the fetish around productivity, the word that a little bit of me dies every time a leader or journalist talks about it, and instead find, like, what is the impact that business and society is meant to have, and tap into something substantially more meaningful than output over time.
You're sounding a little bit sort of crunchy granola. Like, I feel like we should have a little tambourine out, have a sort of fire that we're singing around. What are you meaning by sort of meaningful work?
I don't know if this is like an age thing. I turned 47 recently, or a health thing. I became a dad, and you start wondering about the meaning of life and purpose. I've actually been on the productivity bandwagon for a while. I think it just drives bad behaviors. I think whenever, like, I look at your content and the things you try and stimulate, you're like, how can we do things better? How can we have more lasting, longing impact? How can we build a better, more fulfilling society or a happier life? Like, I don't know any leader that has the desire to have on their gravestone, like, was productive. So if it's not that desire, then what are we doing it for?
In what sort of ways? I don't mean sort of technically, but how are you thinking about or defining productive in the current way? What's so irritating about it for you?
It's the 1820s outputs over time, right? It's the raw definition that often, and I think maybe I've got to wonder, is it the word or is it the mouth it comes out of? Because it's normally either a politician, and that kind of is like, our productivity needs to improve more, so we're going to do all these things. And you're like, have you understood the impact of those things? Whether it be on the climate or the environment or on people. Like, do we need population growth to add to productivity if the planet can't sustain that? I think we ignore the secondary cost and we go for our productivity's improved. Yay, everyone get the banner, get the drums out. Our productivity's gone up. At what cost and at what extent? So whether it's like from a politician's mouth or even worse, an academic's mouth, it's like it sounds pure, but actually I think it's just irrelevant for the times that we're in.
But are sort of companies okay to talk about productivity? I mean, this idea of a kind of an 8-hour working shift and going to an office and being busy and being in meetings, like you have problems with that as well?
Yeah, for that exact same reason. It's funny, whenever we do surveys at Atlassian, we're like, well, you have to include it as part of the drop down. And you're like, if you could improve anything in your company the next year, what would it be? And they're all there, just yelling productivity. And then I often said, like, whenever I meet these people, I'm like, cool, you want to improve productivity? How do you measure that? And they're like, what? Because they don't. It's a feeling. And you're like, oh, so the feeling of productivity, I don't know if that's better or worse. Like, if you see people being busy and they feel productive, like, you got to remember when the pandemic hit, the biggest selling software segment was productivity software, which was actually surveillance software.
Yeah.
Right? So tracking keystrokes and mouse moves. And you're like, does that correlate to the outcomes of my business and my people? Probably not. So whether Bob or Mary be on a production line or working in a factory, if they have a moment of wonder and they have an idea about how to improve things, is that productive? No, because it stopped productivity.
Do you think this is a bit of a sort of trend? Like, I mean, is it just more and more data and what people are doing, whether it's the kind of the webcams that are looking at whether people are paying attention, or the software that can tell people how many minutes they've been on a call for? Like, is
Yeah.
it just getting more and more data and it's getting worse? Or is there a kind of rebellion away from this underfoot?
I think there was a rather intelligent chap by the name of Tom Goodwin helped me understand this, actually. And I think about it in terms of how we adapt to technology change, right? So technology comes along like, oh, you know what we should use the software for? We should use the software to recreate the factory. Because
Yeah.
when I stood in the factory on a higher plinth and I could watch you, I knew you were busy doing things. But now I can't. Let's use software for that. And I think what me and you often talk about is pause. Is there a new world where we can do the software thing, but use it for better, right? And it's the same in the world of AI right now. I've been to a few events recently, and I don't want to be down, mate, but I'll leave demoralized. People like, if we did an experiment and this company rolled out AI and they saved 3 hours a week. And if you save 3 hours across 1,000 people, you can get rid of X many people. I'm like, is that it? Like, is AI the hack? Is it the shear that we needed to go and chop people down? Or is there a different way, right? So I had a conversation with someone the other week about the difference between elapsed time, right, and actual time. Like, a task might only take me an hour, but it takes a week to happen, right?
Yeah.
In that world, if AI actually gave me better data today, better insights, more context, and I made a faster decision, but it took me the same time, is that a good thing or a bad thing? And most leaders are like, it's a good thing, but I can't measure that with my yardstick, so we're not going to do it. We're going to continue to chop down. So I think we've got this opportunity to reframe how we think about work and society and the impact we want to have. But if we're taking the old ideals and using new technology for it, I think we're just gonna we're gonna ruin it.
I have this weird thought because I feel like most people are quite good at understanding people on their team that are working hard. I
Yeah.
feel like people have a fairly intuitive sense of people who are kind of coming up with quite magical ideas. People have a pretty good sense of knowing who's a kind of a people pleaser.
Yeah.
And a lot of this sort of technology and a lot of this data seems to be quite patronizing to the fact that we might just instinctively be quite good at our jobs.
Yeah.
I never thought that I was the sort of best manager in the world, but you could kind of tell when someone was a bit worried. You could kind of tell when someone was they didn't really sort of have their head in the right place because they were concerned about things outside of work. And by not having much data, you kind of became very attuned to it. So you would notice people's body language and you would
Yeah.
sort of see, I guess now you'd see who has their cameras turned on sort of webinars and stuff. And it kind of seems that the more you turn it into a spreadsheet, the less you're using your own judgment. And I guess
Yeah.
some people would say that's a good thing because judgment means prejudice and judgment means, poor people with like poor skills and stuff. But I wonder if this is something that's coming from software companies a bit like Atlassian, because it is possible to measure this stuff, or whether it's being
Yeah.
driven by another movement.
I think you're spot on there on an element whereby there's so many signals that we get when we use our brain and our heart, right? When we use our whole body, and you're picking a rounded picture. I know Mary's struggling with stuff, but she's working hard, and here's what, like, and you start to build this narrative in your head, and therefore you have context versus you get a report that says, Tom, Mary only did 17 keystrokes on Friday. You're like, right. You're no longer looking at the context. And I had a real example of this a few years ago. A company using surveillance software, they nearly fired the chief of staff to the CEO. And she'd spent a day, she disconnected from the internet to build a presentation deck for the CEO, but she wasn't connected while she built it. So no keystrokes were recorded.
It's very odd. It's very odd. It seems like data is quite useful to have in the kind of background, but like above all else, it should be our kind of common sense, I guess.
Yeah, it's the absence of. It's like, what data points are we missing when we just look at one? That's what I'm always curious about. Whenever someone says, here's the obsession metric or the singular answer, I'm like, it's not, is it? There's always another data point that's slightly contrary.
Have you seen companies that are using this more intuitive way of measurement sort of leading the way? Are there sort of particular examples that you've heard about?
Pockets, not enough of it to get excited yet, but pockets. There's a whole movement around reporting. So when we report profits and productivity, we also report impact on planet. We impact on people, so mental health and wellness, right, and society, and then purpose is there something we're trying to help? There's a foundation or a cause, right, or some kind of injustice that we're trying to help. And when you see that slightly more balanced reporting, I think as an investor, you get a more rounded view of the longevity of that company. You're like, are you here for this quarter's profits at all costs? I might not invest in you. You made good money, but it's not sustainable. Or are you thinking about this in a more medium to long-term fashion, right? Which as an investor, like, I'm always curious by, like, do you want to be a forever company, or do you want to be just relevant today and chase a fashion, right? And you've seen that with fast fashion. You can make money making clothes, shipping them really fast. No one wants them. But instead of returning them, that's too expensive. We'll just put them in a rubbish dump. And you're like, that's productive, because as a company, your profits look great. But as a member of society, do we want giant dumps all over the world of clothes that no one's worn? No, like, that doesn't quite feel right. So again, we've won on productivity at the failure of other stuff. Where I see it more is kind of to your point, leaders. There's a whole lot of leaders I'm working with inside Atlassian and outside that have just got this more rounded view of impact. And you're like, I think you're going to get it right. You're the people that everyone wants to work for. You're the teams that over the long term seem a little bit more adaptable. You seem a little bit more aware. You're less worried about failure. You know stuff's going to go wrong at some point. That's fine. That's not it's not a blot on my copybook. Something went wrong. I'm going to learn from that. How do I improve versus folding your arms and trying to hide it? So there's a whole mindset there that when I see leaders do this, I'm like, you're the kind of person I'd hang, whatever challenge you were taking on, I reckon I could work with you.
I remember you talking to me about this idea of what's it called, the personal handbook or something.
Yeah.
I feel like, is it your idea, or have you sort of copied it off someone else?
A bit of both. I'm sure someone else had it way before me. I didn't invent anything, but I may have put some polish on it. We have an exercise called My User Manual. So with teams, I actually did a team offsite the other week. We started with the My User Manual, right? You buy a TV, comes with a user manual. You buy anything, comes with a user manual. Hire a human, no user manual. So instead, what we do is we fill in the gaps. I'm sure you must be like me. You like to be led more. You want to be managed. You want feedback like me. We never ask. So then my user manual is write down your user manual for how you operate. It's your operating system, and you share it with each other. We did it at the start of an offsite. We had tears and hugs and high fives. Like, there was a lot of emotion came out. But the one consistent thing was this penny drop going, oh, I never realized Tom was introverted, and I assumed you were extroverted like me. So I've been treating you a certain way, and that's not getting the best out of you.
What kind of things do you talk about as part of this process? Is it a survey that people do, sort of ticking boxes or something? How does it work?
No, it's a blank piece of paper. You get the sort of 8 elements, you write them down in the room, and then you share them. Like, here's my user manual right now. It's my values. It's how I like feedback. It's what are the 2 or 3 things that really irritate me in life, right? It's what's my working style. Like, what's my home situation? And when I say, like, married, I've got kids, I'm in Australia, and you're in this time zone. Therefore, if I'm doing kid drop off, like, this hour of meeting is going to be really a nightmare for me. They're like, oh, I never knew, but now I know that. Let's work around that. So it's just like, the more context we have on each other, the better chance we've got of building that sort of social contract of how we're going to work together. Or we just assume and we're going to get it wrong.
I do love this, but it does sort of raise another issue, which I'm quite keen to talk to you about, which is, to what degree should our job be so much of our life? To what degree should a company be a company that's making the world a better place? To what extent should our job be, everything we want to be manifested between 9 to 5? Should we be friends with each other at work? Should we know our deepest, gloomiest sort of fears and desires, or should we just sort of tolerate each other?
Yeah. So if you take the binary approach, then it's hard to pick one that's right or wrong. So I like to play with the spectrum of going, where's a nice, sensible midpoint? Do I want to go to therapy with you, Tom, and understand your deepest, darkest secrets of your childhood? No. But do I want to know your
preferred? Yes.
Yeah, I already know them. I don't want to know them twice. It's expensive therapy for me to unlearn them. But do I need that depth? No. But if I get no depth from you and I've only got surface level, I don't think that's helpful. So then knowing a little bit about Tom goes a long way. Knowing your working style, knowing your preferred working hours. You go, you know what? I'm really transactional in the morning. Absolute nightmare. But if you always be creative, 2 p.m. till 5 p.m. Right. So I'm not going to book meetings for you 2 p.m. till 5 p.m. I'm going to get you transactions in the morning because I want you to be creative. And so I think just finding a little bit about each other helps. It's the same on the mission stuff. Do I want to work for a company that's going to save the planet? Not necessarily. But I don't want to work for one that's going to kill the planet either. So what's this midpoint of sufficiently nice where you're not an evil overlord?
I do think that midpoint is quite hard because it seems like sometimes the only way we can find that midpoint is by going the wrong side of the pendulum and then going, oh, wait a minute, because we had the whole sort of bring your whole self to work
Yeah.
period. And it's like, you know what? It's perfectly fine for you to do really dark, gloomy shit in your own time.
Yeah.
Like it's perfectly fine for you to vote for a person that I don't agree with. Like that doesn't affect your ability to get on with me, I'm thinking. But it was almost like we were supposed to come to work and sort of have like a mood board in front of us of all
Yes.
of our personal opinions. And it's like, you know what? We don't have to kind of like sing off the same hymn sheet here. Do you think people are a bit lost these days when it comes to knowing how to work and how to give feedback and how to lead?
Yeah, I think there's so much gameplay. There's so many consequences involved. I can probably count on one hand the number of people that have given me honest, rounded feedback in the last year. And that makes me sad. Like, and when I get it, it hurts a little bit. That's why I know it's honest and rounded, because it's like, oh, it had a lot of a hint of truth in it. It's almost like slightly confrontational, and then I sit with it and I mellow and I dive down. And the rest of the time, it's done in a system in a way that is for another reason, right? It's for a promotion or to look good, right? Or for acknowledgement or recognition, not for feedback to improve. So I'm very careful about sourcing of it. I think it's the same in many elements of working life. There's this theater that's been created. I'm the transformational leader. I've read here, I need to talk about vulnerability. So, I lost a cat recently. So should I cry? Like, and they're trying to play this role, this theatrical role. And you're like, I just want you to be authentic and you. You don't have to pretend at being you. But I think society and certainly the business world pays a dividend for this theater that we create, right? With me and you've seen it in the world of innovation, where nothing innovative happened, but lots of innovation theater happened, right? And behind the scenes, nothing changed.
Do you think there's a kind of generational difference where people are more lost or less lost?
I'm hopeful for the generations coming through, because I think they've got a different sense of society. I grew up in a small village in the north of England. I only knew what my 10 friends in Cheadle knew. Like what they knew, I knew, and that was a small sphere. And then I went sort of 35 miles away to university, right? And I learned a little bit more about the world. And each time I got on a plane or a train, I learned more about the world. You don't have to do that these days, right? You can learn more about the world at your fingertips. So I think there's more awareness and therefore more access to society, more access to community. I don't necessarily think we've got it right. I think we've added more, but we've not added fidelity. Like, again, as I got older, I've got a smaller number of friends, but they're better friends. But I remember a time when you've got 1,000 friends on Facebook. How cool am I? I don't know any of them. They're like, none of them would stop by. If I walked past them on the street, they wouldn't offer me a cuppa or a high five. So they weren't friends. They were just people I'd randomly added. So I think we've got to work out, do we want volume or do we want quality?
I think maybe I've said this on the podcast before, but sometimes if you're an alien and you came into the workplace, you'd sort of presume it's some sort of elaborate performance art where people are kind of given this script that actually maybe is now generated by AI, but it's full of people who are saying the things they're supposed to say.
Yes.
And sometimes you just want to sort of cut through it with like a really significant amount of silliness and just realize how stupid it is that you're all having passionate arguments about, whether the guy wears a t-shirt or a jacket or.
But you're right.
You sort of take comfort from the fact that actually quite a lot of what we do isn't really that important sometimes as well.
I literally did a workshop before Christmas, which was going so badly, and we're all miserable. We went for a stroll around the city. We just need to clear our minds. We went for a big walk. I had to get suntan lotion because everyone's going to burn. They're all quite pale skinned. We went for a big walk. We got back in. And I was like, right, we're going to play a game. The game is you've just been recruited by your competition. You've all been headhunted, and the only thing the competition wants to do is to beat your current company. So what's the idea that would get you fired? Let's do that. And then we worked backwards. And they all got really excited and playful and silly on the whiteboard. And they came up with these ideas. And then we compare. I brought the other whiteboard out from the morning session. I'm like, which ideas are better? And the morning session was like +1% here and +2%. It was just this mediocre misery of
compliant.
Yeah. And then the maverick ideas. And I was like, well, I'm not saying do them, but there's elements in there that we could take and we could refine and make more personal. But when they took that guard down, amazing things happened. Where was that before?
Before we go, what other things do you think we're not talking about enough?
I don't think we're talking enough about people, which is a weird one. People get talked about a lot, but I think we're talking about a lot about AI and systems and productivity and efficiencies and we're doing the dance we think we want to do. This is going, if we just stopped and rebuilt society, like if we were the aliens, we landed, we took control, we've got AI, we've got all the other technology, how would we just build it from scratch a bit different versus trying to reverse engineer what we've got and squeeze it all in? I think we need to have a stop. We need to have a pause moment and go, this is a different world. And let's do it meaningfully and properly and consider people. I think my example there's a call center owner I was chatting to before Christmas. He's like, I can reduce my workforce by about between 35 and 50% with the next version of Copilot. I was like, brilliant. Those call center workers that I'm guessing they're in parts of the world where there isn't another job as a UX designer or whatever else. So what happens to that society? So you've got more margin. Microsoft made some money because they sold you some Copilots. Your shareholders are better off. None of your staff are shareholders, by the way. So what happens to those 30-odd thousand employees that get displaced? I don't think we're having that chat. And then I think kind of to your point, and you've made it a few times, is just this like, is there a chance for us just to think a little bit differently? Is there a chance for us to put a few people in power that aren't in power because they want power? They're in power because they're a bit silly. I'd love if we just got that mix a little bit more right and we had a few maverick random ideas that popped out. You're like, I could get behind that. I don't know. Let's have some fun with it. We're going to mandate that every Sunday everyone has an ice cream because ice cream always makes everyone feel better, right? Rather than worrying about ironing your shirt for Monday, everyone, like the law, everyone has an ice cream and a stroll on a Sunday. The world would be slightly better.
Well, it's hard though, the moment these things become kind of policies rather than byproducts. You know, it's like having a kind of pool table in the office. Like,
yes,
if you have an amazing office, then someone will get drunk one night and find a pool table down a dark alleyway, and then they'll bring the pool table in, and then someone will fix it because it smells a bit like pee.
Yeah.
And then before long, you'll be playing on the pool table. But the moment you sort of say, right, we've got a policy, which is we're going to have a pool table in every office, and you're allowed to play it whenever you want, it's like, oh, you know, sort of the groovy gang in Only Fools and Horses, you know, like,
but on that point, I feel like in search of process, this is like a hangover from Six Sigma. Feels very 90s, but in the search for process, we've forgotten about serendipity and the oscillation of life. We've forgotten about the variance. One of the things that I talked to the CEO about recently was the idea of fixed, flexible, and free. Everything in life is either fixed, flexible. You keep on trying to make everything fixed and you want everything to be consistent. But if nothing's free, then what am I here to do? Right. So like, give me the mix. Tell me the things that are fixed in this company. Tell me the things where I have flexibility, and tell me the things that I can do that you don't care about.
I forget, Dom, have you written a book yet or not? If you were going to write a book, what would it be called or what would it be on?
No, I've not. I think I've got adult ADHD, and every time I sit down to write, I start doing something completely different. If I was write a book, I'd call it Unfucking Work.
Unfucking Work?
Yeah. I think
work or on work?
Unfucking work, just unfucking, because I think the problem is we start with what we've got and we try and polish it versus going, what do we need to get rid of? I'd love to play a game of subtraction, certainly for like large enterprises, these companies that are like, we're 250 years old and here's the museum, and go, that's cool. But what of that history and heritage is a noose around your neck stopping you from delighting your customers or having employees that smile on a semi-regular basis and just bring some joy back into it? But I think step one is getting rid of the barnacles. Right? The follow-up book is now you can make it better. But you can't make it better. Stop buying the self-help book, right? It's like, stop buying the fitness thing until you stopped eating so much lard, right? You've got the things in the wrong order. In the style of Dom Price.
Dom, thank you so much for coming on the show. It's been a pleasure.